right, here is the economic problem. You ready for the economic problem?
Yes.
The
Us.
economic problem is how to best achieve the economic goals. Alright, there are some goals. We call them the 4 primary economic goals. Basically, every economy everywhere of all time has these same 4 goals. We're going to put them up here. We're going to talk about them one at a time. The 4 primary economic goals. Basically, what we're saying is, not only every economy tries to achieve these goals, but here in the U.S. economy, which is what we're concerned about, right?
Yes.
Everybody agrees this is what we are trying to accomplish in our economy. So conservatives and liberals and Republicans and Democrats and independents and Donald Trump and Joe Biden and everybody agrees this is what we're trying to achieve. Obviously, there's a lot of disagreement. What the disagreement is about is how to best achieve these goals. We're not arguing about what we would like to see. We're arguing on how to get there. So we're going to spend a significant amount of time talking about these. There are 4 of them. The first one is low unemployment. Unemployment means people not having jobs. People that want jobs don't have jobs. So low unemployment means high employment, right? We're trying to make sure that people that want jobs can find a job. Everybody agrees. That's what we're trying to achieve. What we disagree on is how to best achieve low unemployment. Everybody agrees that high unemployment is bad. It's bad for the economy. It's bad for the people, obviously, that don't have jobs. But it's bad for society as a whole. We'll have an entire chapter later in the year on unemployment and what it means, how we measure it and all that. All right, the second primary economic goal is stable prices. Not only do you want to make sure you have a job because that's your income, right? But you want to know that how far your money will go. That's where the stable prices come in. We don't like it when prices fluctuate a lot in a short period of time. Now we know prices don't stay the same, right? They do fluctuate. Just take the price of gas, it'll go up, it'll go down, right? It doesn't always stay exactly the same, but we want it to stay relatively stable. It's the price of all things. We don't like periods of high inflation when prices go too high too fast. We also don't even really like too drastic of deflation. We like to know what our money's going to get us.
I don't know, I like deflation a lot.
I prefer it, yeah. We want stable prices. So far, low unemployment, everyone that is willing and able to work has a job. Stable prices, not crazy inflation and deflation. All right, the third primary economic goal is economic growth. Everybody agrees we want the economy to be growing. Right? We disagree on how to achieve that. By the way, we'll get to that. There's 2 types of economic growth. Don't get me wrong, they're both good. Because in both examples, the economy would be growing. There's extensive growth and intensive growth. Extensive economic growth means we are using more of the factors of production. Again, remember what that phrase means. These are the things that go into producing the goods and services. So if businesses are using more land, which of course is natural resources, right?
Mm-hmm.
Using more labor, more capital. So back to our example on pencils. If businesses have more trees to work with, more lumberjacks to work with, more capital, which is tools, right?
Yes.
More money to buy the tools, chainsaws, trucks, all that. Well, we should be able to make more pencils, right? That would be an example of extensive economic growth. That's a good thing, there's nothing wrong with extensive economic growth, but there is something even better. And that's
Intensive
intensive economic growth.
I'm so smart.
Now look what this means. Intensive growth, and I think you can see why this would be better, is somehow we would be able to increase production without using more land, labor, and capital. In other words, back to our stupid example on pencils, we have the same number of trees we ever had, we have the same number of workers, lumberjacks, whatever we've ever had, we have the same amount of money that can buy the same amount of tools like trucks and chainsaws that we've ever had, but we're still able to make more pencils than we used to. Can you see why that would be better than extensive growth? You're not using up any more factors of production, but we're able to produce more. Of course, that would have to do somehow with more efficiency, less waste, whatever. Might be different ways to achieve it. But bottom line, both of them would be we're producing more. And then finally, the fourth primary economic goal is a fair distribution of income. Once we have created all the goods and services, by the way, that's creating the wealth. That is the wealth of the nation, the goods and services. Right, the wealth isn't really the money. Right, what do we do with the money? We buy the goods and services, right? So the goods and services is what makes up the wealth of the nation. So how do we distribute the money to buy all that wealth, all those goods and services? We want to do it fairly, right? We want to be fair. Everybody agrees we want to do it in a fair way. Now, we're going to go back and look at these goals again in a different light. How many of you are, in your personal lives, goal setters? I highly recommend that. For any age, but especially for your age. All right, stupid old saying, if you don't aim for anything, you're bound to hit it every time. All right, you should set goals. You should have goals in your academic life, maybe your athletic life, maybe your social life, your personal life, your financial life, whatever, depending on where you are in life. You should have short-term goals, maybe medium, long-range goals, and long-range goals, like what you want to be doing next year, what you'll be doing in 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Yeah. Here's the thing about goals. You can't tell whether you achieved them or not unless there's some way to measure it. Right? It'd be dumb for me to say, I want to be a better person. Well, how am I ever going to measure that? Has to be something I can measure.
The amount of friends you have.
There you go, whatever. I want to have more friends. Now that I could measure. All right? So Aaron wants to be a good free throw shooter. He wants to be able to consistently hit 8 out of 10 free throws. Well, there's a way to measure that, right? He can go out there and shoot 10 free throws and see if he made 8. He could shoot 100 free throws, see if he made 80. All right, he'll know either I achieved my goal or I didn't. He could measure it. Now let's go look at these economic goals. Yes or no? Is there a way that we can measure whether we have achieved the goal of low unemployment?
Yes.
Yes, there's actually a statistic. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called the unemployment rate. We haven't mentioned it yet, but there is an entire chapter we're going to study later on in the year on what the unemployment rate means, what it doesn't mean, how we come up with that number. All right. But just so you know, there is a statistic called the unemployment rate. So we can tell whether or not we've achieved this goal. There's a measurement. By the way, off the subject, how's the unemployment rate doing right now?
Bad.
Bad. All right, we haven't achieved that goal. For what reason?
COVID.
Yeah, the COVID. We were
Liberals.
before the coronavirus, we had record low unemployment rate. So we were achieving that goal in unprecedented ways until, of course, the virus hit.
Because of liberals.
Now it's high. Alright, so, right now, election year, exactly 8 weeks from today, everybody's arguing on how to get the unemployment rate back down. Alright, everybody agrees they wanna do it, they just have different solutions on how. I might suggest that we go with what worked the first time,
Like
which were
what?
tax cuts and regulation cuts, but whoa, that's a lesson for another day.
Talking about OSHA?
That's part of the regulation, yeah.
Is that, what do they mean by regulations, like the amount they're allowed to produce or something?
Regulate, government regulations on businesses, laws that are expensive to follow, so it makes profits lower for businesses. And when their profits are down, that means their employment rates are down, they can't afford to hire as many people.
You ever seen that, video, like they made a parody song of the Aladdin thing? It was like, welcome to a world of OSHA violations, and then they do a whole bunch of stupid stuff.
I haven't seen that, I probably would enjoy that.
Oh, it's really
Why don't
fun.
you email it to me?
I'll try and find one.
Alright, next one. Let's think about stable prices. Is there a way, again, everybody agrees we should have that, is there a way to measure whether we've achieved it?
Yes.
There happens to be, yeah. Maybe you've heard of the statistic called the inflation rate. Guess what we're gonna do later in the year? We're gonna have a whole chapter on the inflation rate, how we measure it, what it means. But for right now, all you need to know is there is a way to determine whether we have achieved the goal of stable prices. Alright, the next one, economic growth. Do we have a statistic to measure economic growth?
Yes.
Yes, in fact, we've already mentioned it. What is it?
The economy,
More specific than the economy.
the circular flow model.
GDP, the GDP, gross domestic product. Now, I think you know where we're going with this. We're gonna have a whole chapter on that later in the year, on how we measure, how we come up with that statistic called the gross domestic product, or the GDP. But for right now, all you need to know is there is a way that we measure economic growth. The GDP does reflect growth. All right, the final one. Is there a statistic that measures whether or not we've achieved the goal of a fair distribution of income?
Yeah.
Socialism.
Like what?
Socialism.
What would be that statistic?
It's been built for.
Yeah, here's the problem, right?
I don't get into what it
We
is.
can't know whether we've achieved this goal or not unless we agree on the definition of what? Fair. We have to know, what does fair mean? Oh, well, that's where the problem comes in, because fair means something different to everybody,
Does it?
right? To some people, fair might mean an equal distribution of income. Is equal fair?
No.
Why not? What could be more fair than equal? Everybody gets the same amount.
Cause if Otis gets my points for my test, he didn't.
Yeah, we already pointed that out, right? That's not fair.
That's his death.
You studied and got an 80, ended up with a 60, and Otis didn't even show up and got a 70. That's not fair,
That's so.
alright? So, most people agree, pretty much everybody agrees, equal distribution of income wouldn't be fair. Alright? Some people think maybe fair would be, only old people should get the money.
Yeah.
I like
sounds
that
fair.
idea. I think that would be fair. You
You're
kids
not old
don't
yet.
need any money. What do you need money for? And then some people
Gas.
might say, no, old people, what do they have to spend money on?
Yeah.
Right? Young people need the money,
Their
pay for
retirement.
college, buy houses and stuff.
You don't need to go to
You would
college.
think that. See, everybody has a different definition of fair.
You need to go to college.
Alright, until we agree on what is fair, which, by the way, will never, ever happen, we can't measure whether we've achieved this goal. So again, let's look at them. Low unemployment rate, is there a way to measure it? You got it. It's called the unemployment rate. Stable prices, is there a way to measure it? Inflation rate. We can use that stat. Economic growth, GDP, we'll use that stat. Fair distribution of income, uh-oh, there's no statistic because we disagree on what fair is. All right, by the way, the age-old argument between Republicans and Democrats has always been, what's the definition of fair? What's fair mean? At least economically, they argue about a lot of other things, but the economic argument could be boiled down to the definition of fair. All right, we're gonna get to that eventually, within this week, next week, that idea between capitalism and socialism. Republicans usually lean more toward capitalism. You earn it, you keep it, it's yours. Democrats usually lean more toward the socialism side. We need to be redistributing that money, shared a little bit more evenly. All right, they disagree on the whole definition, so there's no way we'll know whether we achieve this goal because we don't agree on what fairness means. Any questions on the 4 primary economic goals?
No.
All right. Now we're gonna look at some economic questions. I know you want to. Economic questions. There are 3 economic questions. How many economic questions are there?
3.
These questions must be answered by every economy. I would even say that every economy does answer these questions, even if they didn't know there were any questions. They're still answering these 3 questions just by how they run their economy. So these 3 questions will get answered. Every economy answers them. And there's really, when you boil it down, there's really only 2 ways to answer these 2 questions. One way would be these questions are answered by commands from the government. In that case, we would call it a command economy. Someone who favors that would be called a command economist. So a command economy, you might want to put a parenthesis somewhere, sometimes is called a planned economy. Alright, so somebody in the government plans out how these questions are going to get answered. Whole idea of big government involvement in the economy. Alright, or the flip side of that, these 3 economic questions, which we'll get to in a minute, what they are, the 3 questions can be answered by allowing the market to work. Someone who's in favor of that would be called a market economist. We would call that a market economy. Also sometimes called a free market economy. In other words, it's not going to be up to the government. It's just let the market work.
Which one are you?
Let the market work. You can't figure that out. You're not paying attention. I think you can figure out which one I am.
Let the market
Let
work.
them watch.
There you go.
Like with the surplus and
The solutions to shortages and surpluses. That's right.
Oops.
All gonna start coming together here the more we learn. So again, there's 3 questions. Every economy has to answer them. There's basically 2 ways to answer them. The government figure it out, or just let the market work. Command planned economy, or free market economy. Now let's get to the questions. There's 3 of them. First one's called the output question. By the way, these questions must be answered in order. You can't answer them out of order. You'll see why. Output question, what are we gonna produce? Alright, we got all these natural resources, land. We got all these people, labor. We got all this money to buy whatever tools we need, capital. Alright, we got the risk takers, the entrepreneurs, whatever. How are we gonna put it all together? What are we gonna make with it? That's called the output question. What are we gonna produce? Once we answer that question, that brings us to the input question. Once we know what we're gonna produce, next big question is, how will it be produced?
Some kid just got kidnapped in a white van.
My phone's ringing too.
Is that what's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, the
some
Amber
kid-
in there?
It's literally a white van. Are you gonna
And
have a
then
white?
finally,
It is.
classic.
I know.
Once we have
Unknown
answered
tag.
the output question, we know what we're producing, then we've answered the input question, we know how we're producing it. Finally, now we've produced whatever it is, the GDP, all the goods and services. The big distribution question, final question then is, who will receive what is produced? Who gets the gross domestic product, the GDP? Who gets all the goods and services, or as I like to put it, who gets the stuff?
And who gets the money?
And boil it down even further, it's who gets the money. Now, we are gonna outline all three of these questions, because there is way more than meets the eye to these questions. So we're gonna outline them one by one
Did you watch
and see what the output question's really asking, and then what the input question's really asking, and the distribution question, what it's really asking. And then, we're gonna look at the command solution to each one, and the market solution to each one.